Okay, good morning, everyone. So here we are at Open Hours on the 1st of September. It's already September. The year is flying by. My gosh. So this is an episode we want to spend some time talking about Loader. There were some changes in Loader in 3.4 and some changes to the seed file that Dave talked about in a blog post a couple months ago at this point. And there were some questions in the comments here, and then otherwise in the other various forums that folks ask questions about. And I wanted to get an opportunity to have an open Q&A about the loader changes, about the seed changes, and just to have Dave reiterate some of those things. And it should be pretty straightforward, some simple changes, and not a whole lot to worry about. There were a couple of people I know, at least in IRC, that did run into some issues about some self-hosting modules or something like that, and needed to do some tweaks or some changes. And so I wanted to get those concerns out in the open, see if there were any rough spots that we can just document and iron out for posterity. And then, since we haven't done an open hours talking about some of the cool things that you can do with Loader, I did want to spend some time on that, because it's incredibly powerful. I mean, Loader is just so awesome. It's one of the biggest, most amazing things about YUI 3, and there's just so much capacity for doing awesome things with Loader, and right now I think that it's not really being used to its fullest. And of course we have more plans and awesome things that we plan on supporting for it in the future as well. So I wanted to talk about some of the things that people are doing now, and potentially some of the things that people can do that, who knows if maybe you knew about it or maybe you didn't. So before we get started with that, just a couple of news items. There are some new interesting things going on recently that that I want to share with you guys. It's kind of hot off the presses stuff. Okay, so let's see. Derek is not in yet. Okay, so Derek Gathright posted a gallery module for the Google Code Prettifier, the syntax highlighter that we're actually using on our site. And so you'll see this here. So the syntax highlighting that's happening there is done using Google Prettify, or I think that's the name of the module, I'm not quite sure. But the gallery module that Derek Gathright wrapped that in is called Gallery Prettify. And so that's a nice thing that you can do to add to your own site for doing any syntax highlighting, or if you have a need for doing that. Maybe just because I'm working in a library, I'm interested in doing syntax highlighting and stuff on the content that I'm writing. But there is one caveat with that. And that is, let's see, can I do a gallery search at this point for Prettify? Let's see. There we go. Okay, so Gallery Prettify. It's pretty straightforward as far as its use is concerned, but the one caveat is that because the Google Code, the syntax highlighter is Apache licensed, it doesn't fall under the BSD license requirement of the CDN, so it can't be hosted on the CDN. So it's still available for doing a direct source, or to add that module specifically in the instance configuration, in the modules configuration there, as he's given this example right there. So that's one interesting bit. Another really big thing is that, Ryan, you were able to convince YouTube to open up their doors a little bit for us and let us create an account where we can dump all of our YUI Theater videos on. So let's see, that's youtube.com. You want to post the link to that in the...
Yeah, and it wasn't so much convincing as it was bribing Paul Irish with YUI t-shirts.
Sweet. So yeah.
Hopefully he wears those over his jQuery t-shirts.
Oh, I'm sure he will. Yeah, the idea is we don't have all of the YUI Theater videos up on YouTube yet, but we're going to be posting the back catalog. We've got a lot of the old long-lost ones that kind of disappeared from video.yahoo.com when they did their big purge. So if there's a long-lost YUI Theater video you want to watch, check it out on YouTube and see if it's there.
Yeah, but
and
they're...
this Open Hours recording will upload to YouTube too. So.
See, that's new. That's exciting. You can start doing that for Open Hours in the future. That's awesome. And they're rolling in pretty quickly. How far are you in the translation of that?
The translation of what?
I'm sorry, the migration of the videos onto the YouTube channel.
Oh, I'm as far as you see there. So I'm apparently up to Brendan Ike at YUIConf 2010 or 2009.
Okay, so not much left to do.
No, well, there's 2010 and 2011 to do, but yeah, we'll get there.
Okay. Cool. So that's YouTube/YUI library, and it's getting fuller in by the day. Okay, so speaking of YuiConf, I know that this question has been coming up a lot, and the answer is yes, we are doing a YuiConf this year. You can call it YuiConf, call it YuiConf. We just go back and forth. And the plan at this point is to roll out a 3.4.1 version so that we'll have some new code out there, a new release out before YuiConf, so we have some interesting stuff to talk about. 3.4.1 will primarily be a bug fix release, but it'll at least give us time to have something new and fresh in the library. 3.4.1, I would say actually 3.4.1 isn't scheduled. It isn't a .1 release because we saw a huge host of bugs that come out in 3.4, so much as we just wanted another release to happen closer to YuiConf. So doing a full 3.5, that takes a little bit more time, so let's do a shorter release and call it 3.4.1. So 3.4.0 is out there, it's pretty stable. We're going to be pushing out a 3.4.1 in preparation for YuiConf in the first week of November. You heard it here first. So the first week of November is when we are planning to do YuiConf. We will have official dates, so the specific dates for you in the next couple of days. And the 3.4.1 release schedule is going to be, we're going to be pushing that one out for GA on October 4th. Is the planned release date for 3.4.1, and if we get all of our ducks in a row, then we'll pull that back into 9/27, so the end of this month, and hopefully that'll happen. I mean, we've been pretty decent about being on top of our schedules recently, so that's good. So right around the 9/27 time frame, you'll see. We'll either be ramping up for a release that week, either the 27th or the 28th, or the official plan is that we'll have it out on the 4th or the 5th. But we might be able to pull it in early.
Luke, so Jeff Craig is asking if the YuiConf is going to be the first full week in November or like the first, few days of November. So. Well,
I don't. It'll just be 2 days. So YuiConf will be, like last year, it'll be 2 days. And at this point, I think we are also planning on having a couple of trainings like we had last year, but rather than have the trainings run simultaneous to the actual conference, we'd like to separate that out so you don't have to choose between going to conference talks or going to a training. but we'll get the schedule ironed out and get the dates posted in the next couple of days for everyone. So we don't have a schedule of talks at this point, obviously, but we still have to develop all of those. But at least we can get the talk dates and the training schedule mostly out. But the big point is, yes, we're doing a YUI Conf, and you can plan for it the first week of November. And please come. Jenny, did you have any points to share on the YUI Conf front other than that? Nope. Okay. All right. So with that, let's get to talking about Loader. Eric, I'm going to let you take over, and you can give a run up to this, and Dave can give the once over, and then we can open it up to the floor for Q&A. If folks have something that they want to share, let us know in the chat. If you want to talk about it, which is totally fine, and you have a mic that you want to you have a mic available for Connect, then use the raise hand feature, which is down below underneath the chat on the left-hand side, and we'll cue you in and let you ask your question. Then we can chat about it then. So I'm going to stop sharing.
So we wanted to talk about some things related to recent loader changes in 3.4.0. Dave wrote a blog post about this before, but we're just going to have him touch on some of the highlights there from that. And then also we're going to be looking at how to set up, to use the advantages of Loader to load non-YUI files, and also look at setting up module groups and best practices for having your own application modules loaded using Loader, along with pulling YUI from the seed or from the CDN. And we'll be looking at how we're doing that with the new YUI library website as kind of an example of how we envision this stuff being done. And we'll be open for questions too, and if Dave has any stuff that he's thinking for upcoming releases that he may want to get some feedback on. So, Dave, do you want to maybe just briefly touch on highlights for Loader changes in 3.4?
Sure. So I don't want to reiterate everything that was in the blog post, but there are just a few pieces that was updated for 3.4 that are very, very important for the things that we want to do in the future. One of the fundamental changes we made was that we went back to how the seed file was delivered in the original versions of YUI 3, which was actually combining YUI and Loader together instead of making that second request. We actually, after doing a bunch of research on it, found out that that second request was actually costing us more than it was helping if we just delivered the payload up front. But one of the problems with delivering that up front was the actual size of the file. And the majority of the seed itself is actually just the metadata that powers all of YUI. So in the beginning, when we decided on doing all these submodules, we thought it was a great idea to do them all, but it turned out that much submodule data inside of the Loader config was actually a lot bigger than what it needed to be. So the metadata actually sits inside of a Loader module, and you're seeing it up on the screen now. This is the current metadata, and you'll notice that it's just key value pairs. In previous versions, there was actually a path directory in those submodules to tell Loader that this submodule belonged to this parent module, so you needed to stitch the directory together differently in order to generate the URL. So that caused us a problem, considering that a lot of these modules had that file path in it, and it actually made this metadata much larger than it needed to be. The only problem with that was that our build system relied on that. So our build system was actually putting these things into so like drag and drop has several submodules. So each one of those submodules are then put underneath of drag and drop's normal build directory. And that metadata bound those two together, and it made it extremely bulky when we didn't need it to be. So by removing that path, we changed our build system to actually push all of these files out into a flattened state. So instead of things being bound underneath of a parent module, they're all one at a time modules. So with them being one at a time modules, the key value pair to stitch the URL together is just the name of the directory, name of the file.js, and that's it. So busting those things out like that allowed us to bring our metadata down smaller, which made it even easier for us to change the seed and say that loader now comes with the seed, so you don't have that second HTTP request just to figure out what you need to do and then go out and get everything else.
And then wasn't also this change of flattening out the modules made the dependency calculations that loader has to do less complex too?
Yes, so that's the second part of these things. That every time that loader had to run through and do a calculation to determine any of the dependencies, it would have to look to see if there was a submodule or a plugin on each of these items, and then it would have to iterate through all those things as well. So by flattening that structure so it's a straight JSON object instead of a nested JSON object, we didn't have to loop through all of these different pieces. And we were seeing in some cases 3,000 or 4,000 function calls that we get to skip because it's no longer having to iterate over these sub-trees of that data over and over again trying to stitch things together.
Simplifying, so a nice flattened module list, and simplifying the calculations. So at least the logic gets smaller. The metadata ends up staying about the same size, though, right?
It ends up going down just a little bit, but it's actually
okay.
gzippable better.
Ah, good.
So it gzips better because of the duplication of the actual key names in the JSON data. The other thing that this is supposed to help us with is when we're putting YUI on the server. So one of the things that we're looking at for the remote loader service is being able to serve multiple versions of YUI with the same loader instance. So having to dynamically merge two sets of metadata in order to serve, like, say, a version of gallery and a version of YUI at the same time, merging that flat file structure is much faster than having to merge a deeply nested JSON file structure too.
Yeah.
So that seems pretty important too for devices like phones and tablets, which don't have as much power as desktops, to be able to do these dependency calculations quicker. I think that's really important.
And it also helps us on the server again as well, because now we're not only looking at just having our 300 or so modules in the system, we're looking at having 800 or 900 modules when you start bundling in versions of gallery. Or if, we release it and you have your own set of modules that you have a couple of hundred, you're looking at a couple of thousand modules that it might have to loop through on the server to figure out what the dependency tree is. So any place that we can keep it from having to jump down that nested hierarchy is a win.
Yeah, it sounds like it was definitely the right architectural decision to make. But so that's as far as the structure of the metadata. Then there was also, you touched on the fact that there were no longer these rollup files, right?
Yes.
But there was a question about the new updates being pushed out to Builder, the actual public Builder project. But just to know that the Builder project does still support creating those physical rollup files.
Yeah, we just changed our build.properties files to not create them.
Exactly.
So that's just something that we're doing because we we can. Because we are hosting YUI from the combo handler. We know that we don't have to build physical rollups. And
if you can.
Go ahead.
If you can scroll up a little, I actually explain it in this blog article. It's not just the fact that we have the combo server. It's actually a flaw in the actual usage of rollups. So rollups are a bad idea. Because
Dave, why don't I stop sharing and you can just share your screen so you can.
Well, I would rather have you do it because of my really slow connection.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, the last time I tried to share it didn't work so well. That's what I get for being in the Midwest. So the main reason we removed the rollups was for multiple YUI instances that get created, and not even that much, but it's just using two modules at the same time. There was a lot of dead overlap between the two. So, like in the example that I'm showing here, we've got Module A requires 2 parts of event, and Module B requires a different 2 parts of event. So when you're asking for both of those, in prior versions of YUI, you would actually get all of event because you've reached the peak of that allow rollup setting. So it would give you 5 modules or 8 or 9 modules when you only asked for 4. So this is a very simple explanation of it, but when you start getting into larger applications, when you get into larger applications that are that really require performance, they don't want the kitchen sink when they didn't ask for it. They only asked for the 2 or 3 pieces. It also helps when it comes to mobile devices. You don't want to be shipping 3 or 4 extra modules down to this mobile device when it's never actually been asked for and it won't even be used.
Wasn't the history of rollups, the history of physical rollups was sort of for performance, or more, I guess more for convenience though, right? So in YUI 2, we had a series of common rollups like YUI DOM event and the utilities JavaScript file, which were because you would end up, implementers would end up, or we started having script tags, a bunch of script tags on the page. And so before we started really pushing the combo service for doing that, or even before the combo service was available, they would have to include, Yahoo.js and DOM.js and Event.js, and so they end up making several HTTP requests. And so once the combo service came along, that did sort of address that, but you still have to create the combo string yourself. But we created these physical rollups so that you could just have one script tag for here's your get up and running with YUI, or here is one script tag to include instead of including 7 script tags on your page. But with the combo service, that ends up being a less efficient solution, and certainly it has the problems that you're talking about here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And back when we originally designed the rollups, like you said, in YUI 2, the combo service didn't exist, but even when it did start to exist, we were the only ones that had it. There was no open source equivalencies to it. Now, there's a combo handler in pretty much any language that you'd want to have one. You can just drop it into any project you want and make your own. And the YUI 3 loader is actually smart enough to be able to help you with that. And we can show that in a little bit when we show the YUILibrary.com config for it, that you can have the combo service combo up all of the YUI modules to our combo file server, but then if you have your local one with your own stuff, have it choose to go there for your stuff instead, and you still get the benefit of the combo service both ways.
Eric, didn't you do that for Tip the Web?
Yeah, we did that. I was like the guinea pig for trying out groups when Adam was on the team and first implemented them. One, I think we should dive into that, but one thing I just wanted to touch on before that Charles brought up is like, does this affect his code, this removal of rollups? Maybe he was saying he wanted to use Node, where Node used to be a physical rollup. And the answer is we tried to mitigate that by creating this new idea of virtual rollups, or a like alias to say that if you say in your use statement to use node, what it really would translate to is pulling down all of the node related modules. So it shouldn't affect your actual implementations of your use statements when you are using these named rollup modules that physically used to exist. Now it's more of a virtual namespace alias.
Is this where it is, Dave? No, I guess not. Where's the alias list right now?
No, it's under alias.js
in
the
YUI?
YUI source.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not in Loader, it's in YUI because YUI needs to have it to support use star.
Yeah, that's right. The dreaded use star. So as you can see, we previously had a lot of physical rollups, and now we have a lot of aliases or virtual rollups, like Eric was talking about.
Yeah, so I haven't actually exposed a lot of those yet because we didn't put any sugar on top of being able to add your own, but theoretically you could just add in a name with an array of modules into that list, and you could have your own virtual rollup.
There's a tip for you. That sounds pretty cool.
Right, but like I said, we didn't put any sugar or anything on it. It's just all sitting on this static property, so you could put anything in there you wanted, and it would work just like one of our rollups do. So anytime that a YUI use is called on this module, under the hood, it actually explodes it to those pieces instead.
Nice, but there's so that's something that you would need to do before any call to use, obviously.
Right. So you could include a JS file underneath your seed and have it populate the env with the aliases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was,
So
I remember in the early days of rollups. Sorry, I remember in the early days of rollups there was some questions about how you could make your own rollups, and that being somewhat of a pain in the neck earlier on. I think it got easier once we figured out the best way to do that. But if you are hosting your own combo service, then this could be a nice, easy way to handle that, to create a more convenient use statement that pointed to virtual rollups, or a set of virtual rollups, I guess. Okay.
So should we get into this idea of you're writing your application, you're breaking your code into modules. What's the best way to load up your modules alongside of the YUI core modules using Loader, and what tools are out there to be able to do that? And we can also look at the new YUILibrary.com site, which is doing this, and using Ryan's Node.js-based combo handler, which is tuned really well to work with YUI modules and the way that we do combo handling.
Hey, Eric, why don't I let you share then?
Okay.
You can stop sharing so you can share your screen there and drive from there.
Give me a second here. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure with Lion and Connect if it would work. So let's see here. So with Loader, this is I'm just on the YUI the user guide for the YUI global module, and specifically looking at Loader. there's this. Let me bump this up. We have this ability to specify module groups, and by default, there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. There's a YUI3 module group, which is configured to point to our CDN. But what you can do is you can specify your own group, and this would be very useful for, like, say, your site or your application, and you can then use that to list off your different module metadata, along with specifying the configuration information that Loader would need to be able to contact and make requests to your combo server for your locally hosted modules. And why this is really useful is then when you can use YUI like normally and do a call to YUI.use and specify your modules, and it will then make sure that it's optimizing the HTTP request, where there'll be one request that goes out to the Yahoo CDN, which grabs all the core modules that are needed, and then one request to your locally hosted combo server to combine all of your modules that you want to use in one additional request. So you can basically get things down to, say, 2 requests there, which is what we would suggest for the best performance. Dave, is there anything that changed with the groups for 3.4?
No, group support is still exactly the same as it used to be.
Okay. So to look at a real world example of these being used, we can look at the YUI configuration for the new API docs section of the new website, and this is using groups to pull the sites modules down from the locally run combo handler on the site, and then let the YUI modules, the core modules, come from the CDN. And so if we look here, we can see hoverable, search, Twitter feed. These are all custom modules, API doc, filter, etc. But where's the groups listed? Oh, so yeah, so we have the top here, this additional group called site, and it's saying, yes, we want to combine these modules when multiple ones are requested. The combo base exists here, which is /combo.js, and this is locally hosted. And so what this will allow is when our API docs page says it wants to use, say, hoverable, search, API filter, API list, and API search, that there's only one additional HTTP request to load up those modules as they're called to be used in the actual application code that's using them to build the features. And this is all being backed by Ryan's open source combo handler library that runs on Node.js, and so it uses Node and Express, which is what the new site is using, and it makes it really simple to use to define a path on your site in which you're going to combo handle modules for. And Ryan, do you want to touch on any things here, or talk about how this is maybe built and how people would use it, or if there's anything that people should know when using it?
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, I can talk about.
Sure.
It's basically pretty simple. The idea is that this is just Express middleware. So if you've used Express at all, you know that a middleware is basically something that you can have multiple middleware functions assigned to handle a particular request or all requests at a particular route, however you set it up. And so this can just run in your existing Express app, and you can tell it just handle all requests under this route. So for example, in this case, under the foo route, combine files that are found under this local path when they're requested here. And that's basically all you need to do to set this up, and then it just starts behaving as a combo handler at that path. So it's pretty simple, and if you put a caching proxy in front of it, like Nginx, then you get really great performance. It caches the combo handler output, and then gzips everything before sending it. So very easy to set up and use, and very high performance in production.
And the proof in pudding is at yuilibrary.com, actually.
Right.
And so, where was it? So this YUI config that we have here, and this is used on every page on the site, Ryan?
Yeah, right now you'll see this on every single page. If you view source, you'll actually see the minified version of this inline. And eventually we'll probably move that to a separate file so that it gets cached. But right now it's not too big.
Yeah, so we have the combo handler Node.js one from Ryan. There's also the PHP combo handler, and I'm not sure exactly what state that one is in. I've never used it personally, but I believe since the URLs for what loader expects in this case, where it's a query string of paths to modules that it should combine together, it's a pretty standard, straightforward thing that the PHP loader should also still work great with groups and combo handling your application modules if you're in a PHP environment.
I think Ryan also has a PHP combo handler too, don't you?
I don't have a PHP combo handler. A long time ago, in like 2007, I wrote a PHP project called Minify that I haven't been maintaining since then. Now it's being maintained by a guy named Steve Clay, who's done much awesomer things with it than I have. But you can look that up. Just search for PHP Minify. But it'll do combo handling type things, and it'll do like real-time dynamic minification of JavaScript and CSS, and then cache the minified resources and things like that.
So I guess one point of distinction to make here is that specifically we're talking about combo handling of modules that will exist on the server. There's a lot of individual files on the server, and you are configuring on the client side, you're configuring the loader to know about those individual modules, their metadata, their dependencies, and using a group to configure a specific to configure a specific combo handler for a group of modules. Now that's different than what we are going to be doing in the future, which is server-side dependency resolution and minification, and well, not minification, and combo handling, which is the remote loader service, which will alleviate having the module metadata on the client. So that'll bring the seed file size down significantly again, but then making simple requests up to the server and not getting the metadata down on the client, instead just doing the dependency calculation on the server. And having that service also do the combo handling and bring it back down. So there's two separate things. There's client-side configuration of modules with a server-side combo handler versus using a remote loader service where there's also the information about the metadata on the server, and that metadata then doesn't have to come down to the client.
So there's also this this great article by Brian Miller, or Brian_endpoint in YUI on IRC. He wrote up this good article about how how he's doing this, and it really goes into detail and good explanation of how to set up. In this case, also having a locally hosted YUI and gallery. So I believe that they're probably needing to run over HTTPS or something, and since the CDN does not support HTTPS, he shows how he's set up to host a local instance of YUI and gallery and YUI2 and serve it all out. So I can post a link to this in the chat if somebody didn't already. Maybe if Connect doesn't freeze. Let's see, Dave, do you think that, or Ryan, do you think there's any other stuff you guys wanted to point out about what we're doing in the new site with related to Loader or how we're splitting up our modules?
We're not really doing anything too advanced right now, but I think that YUI config that you showed is probably a pretty good best practice for even a basic YUI use case. That shows you how you can pretty easily define your custom module config, and it doesn't take very much extra work at all to define that metadata, and then you get a huge benefit, especially if you have a combo handler.
And that's mostly it. Now, is that mostly useful if the number of custom modules that you have is fairly small, or once you start getting into a larger amount of custom modules, would using something like the what's it called, the config function or something like that, as something that you can config function is also something that you can pass into groups for handling your patterns.
Config function.
Where it'll, so it's inside of the patterns. Actually, let me share my screen. So there's one of the things that that I think is actually really cool in Loader that might not be getting used as much as it could be. And Dave, maybe you can caution me away from using this crazy stuff if it is worth cautioning about. But if you specify a group, this is a little proof of concept that I put together a little while ago for using Loader and the Loader configs to request files based on the location in the file systems, or sort of require JS patterns. But let me jump to the end result. This is what it looks like. When you say use, YUI use, you're going to say A, and that's going to automatically look for a file named that. And this is going to read that path, and it's going to have some intelligence put in because the patterns that are associated with this group starts with this sort of thing. So you can use this groups feature. I'm naming the group by path, but I'm specifying patterns. So a module name starts with this string. So like we would say the YUI2, the 2 and 3 project will use a pattern where the module names start with YUI2 dash. So this would be, it starts with a bang, for example. And I'm going to say these are some default paths for stuff. And then you can get into the config function, which I actually think is really pretty cool, where you can build up the name of the file and the location that you're going to be pulling that module from. You can just build that up dynamically based on a set of logic rules instead of having to iterate through a series of individual module names. Now, this might not necessarily scale in the case of things needing dependencies and having to do dependency resolution and things like that. But this is another something else that you can do with a Loader config and the groups config in specific. But I'll post a link to this gist. But I don't think there's a lot of visibility to for the config function and some of the other crazy things that you can do in the patterns config for a group. Dave, maybe I haven't found that in the API docs or in the user guides.
No, there's not a whole lot of documentation on that yet.
Yet, very important. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing here.
So did anyone have any questions or comments about Loader stuff, or maybe if how they're using Loader in their apps? You can raise your hand in the chat, or type in the chat, or raise your hand with the little button. Well, should we move on to see if Derek wants to talk about the gallery CSS button stuff that he's been working on?
Oh yeah, that was new too. That came out. Derek, did that come out in 3.4 or post 3.4? Do you want to share your screen, Derek?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Derek, do you want me to share my screen? Would that be easier, and just have you talk?
No, yeah, you can send it over to me.
You should be able
All right, it's open. You can just
Okay.
click share.
Okay, can you guys see everything?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So one of the things that we've been working on lately is a core button module. We currently have there's a few button modules that are actually out there. One of them is the Alloy UI buttons. The other one is just Gallery button. So we realized that we want to go ahead and promote and have an officially supported core button module. So this is one of the projects that I'm working on. We're starting with just a CSS skin that's in the gallery at the moment, and looking for some, and I can go ahead and show it off, and I definitely welcome any feedback and let me know about any use cases people have. So at the moment it is only, let me see if I can pull up the source. Yeah, it is only a CSS file that can be loaded in either directly including the script tag or actually via the loader. So if I pull up Gallery CSS button here, so as you can see, it's just one CSS button.css file. And if we pull up the example that I've created so far to actually decorate these buttons, it will pull up a site or a page that's hosted on my GitHub pages, and you can go through and click and see all the various styles that we're working on right now. The goal is to have it with two skins, the Sam skin and the Night skin as well. So that one is actually a little out of date. This one's a little bit more recent with the Night skin. Yeah. So go to the YUI gallery and you'll see, let's see here, we look at all of the modules and you'll see a CSS button. Let's see the CSS button down here.
It was also featured on the front page too, on the top column.
That is actually true. You can see it in the featured module. So click on that, take a look at the example, and I do have some known issues here. I actually have done quite a bit of IE testing lately, so I'll go through and update some more notes on that. But yeah, take a look at the code, play around with the example, and like I said, we're definitely looking for some kind of use cases for how people want to use this as we go through and build the actual JS module. Knowing use cases would be pretty helpful. So yeah, anybody have questions about the button stuff? No. Okay.
So
did you want me to talk about the CDN stuff as well?
Yeah, we touched on it briefly. Luke mentioned how we have to have BSD licensed modules will be the only thing. YUI BSD licensed modules will be the only thing that will be hosted on the CDN, but that doesn't mean that it can't be in the gallery if it's not. And so that's the case with the Google Prettyify, right?
Yeah, that is correct. And yeah, sorry, I missed the first half, so I missed that part of the discussion. If anybody's curious, there's two examples out there that I've put in the gallery that are not BSD licensed. One of them is Gallery Prettyify, and that is just hosted also off of my GitHub pages with the JavaScript as well as the CSS. And then I do also have Mustache, which is a templating library, and that is an MIT license, and that is you can actually pull that one directly from GitHub. So if anybody wants to host something that is not a BSD license, those would be two good examples to look at on how you can actually do it.
So Derek, one question Nate had is in the gallery CSS buttons, what does limited IE support actually mean, or what versions does it support?
Of IE, I don't have my IE6 virtual machine opened up at the moment, but it will be supported and fully degrade down to IE6 for basic functionality. It won't support the CSS3 transitions. It will actually do some gradients even in the IE6 and other versions of IE. But yeah, so our goal is to get it looking and working with all the latest and greatest features in modern browsers using CSS3, but also to maintain basic functionality in IE6 as well.
Well, I guess for the last couple minutes, does anyone else have anything that any questions or comments about anything we talked about today? We are recording. We did record this, and we will post the video, at least a link to it, in the blog post that Pat just linked to. And also the plan is to eventually get these open hours videos up on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube user account is YUI Library, and so those should be up there as well, along with all the theater videos. So if there's nothing else anyone wants to add, I guess we can close down for today. And thanks everyone for coming, and feel free to continue the chats and YUI on IRC. Yeah, Nate, the best place to go into IRC. All right, well, thanks everyone, and hope to see you guys all at the next open hours.